We have Stop the FOMO and Brian of Brian's Tech Therapy running the live stream. They'll be having judges and myself and some other participants in for interviews here and there, but they're really responsible for hyping this event up. We have the OLEDs on the bottom and the LCDs on the top. At the top left, we have the Samsung QN95C. Here in the middle, we have the Sharp. Over here, we have the Hisense U8K. Then starting back on the bottom left, this would be the Samsung S95C OLED. In the middle, we have the Sony A95L OLED. And on the bottom right, we have the LG G3 Gallery series.
I think my safest thing to say is all of the TVs I'm interested in buying are on the bottom.
It was a very close shootout. How close was it?
It was incredibly close.
And today's video is brought to you by WhoKeys. Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows 10 software on the cheap? WhoKeys to the rescue. Use my code SF20 and immediate discount. At the bottom of this order where it says code CARD, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from WhoKeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can download a copy of Windows 11 Pro with my discount code SF20 and bam.
Hey, Kenny, you want to come hang out?
Kenny is one of our judges.
My name's Kenny Alnestica. I've been working in broadcast television and audio for quite some time. I'm an ISF level 3 calibrator.
Classy came to tell me specifically that in SDR Bright Sports, all the TVs have the same brightness. Did you see that?
Some people were complaining about LEDs being with the OLEDs and it not being fair and all these other things. But it was very interesting to see things with the Samsung LED on top of the Samsung OLED, right, where according to specs, the LCD was going to do a higher nit value. But when you saw them next to each other, it didn't matter. You know, like you weren't seeing that. The TVs I've had, I think I've purchased everything on the market. So there's always what I prefer. Okay. Like for me, I'm kind of cheap personally.
So Kenny was just saying, he goes, look, it took me a while to move over to OLED. So I'm like, oh, what was it? Because they were too dim. When did you move over? He's like, oh, S95. I'm like, last year? He made it sound like it was 10 years ago. It was like, no, it was yesterday. I bought it yesterday.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Yeah. Fist bump for value.
Yeah. What you saw, you're saying strong showing from both QD-OLEDs, both Samsung and Sony.
Out of all the 6 displays here, as the votes are being tallied up, I think the underlying theme was QD-OLED had an incredibly strong showing. The richness of the contrast, the color response, just, very strong. So I suspect one of those is going to be the winner. Mm-hmm. Now, I was just kind of mentioning that there's almost always a theme that Sony, like, even though they're using the same panel, Sony always comes to market a little bit later. I think genuinely Sony is tuning the DSP. They're processing the image slightly differently. Clearly, they're doing something to the sharpness that isn't over sharpened. It's just a slightly different draw to the image.
Because you would definitely, out of all people, you'd pick up on something that's got too much sharpness. Well,
if it was too much, I'd be screaming right now. So, yeah, I mean.
The Samsung, I think, showed really well. I really did against the Sony. And
specifically what? Like specifically?
The highlights, color balance. I just went back and looked at the Sony again against the Samsung. Sony's picture processing makes the picture just a little sharper.
That's what I'm seeing.
Especially when we have our nice, reference display. We have a Sony 310 here. I don't know if you guys have talked about that. So we are doing a little bit A/B comparison, but most interestingly enough, there's also areas where that 310 reference display doesn't do as well in some of the categories that the TV will do well in.
Have you seen that before, or are you like that's?
Oh yeah, it's common. Reference displays are not designed to be something you enjoy content on. They're trying to do so many different things and have like ultimate control over your image, and you're not throwing vector graphics with flutes and Siemens stars and things like that.
So I guess you have your prediction for me.
I would say it's probably leaning towards the Sony. LG had a lot going for it. There's just a couple of weird things that everyone was making notes of. Like there was some banding, which from a professional standpoint, banding is a non-entry point for me on any display technologies.
Now, speaking of the G3, I know you have like the cleanest G3 in history.
In all honesty, I don't use the G3 anymore at home. I went back to the G2 of some of the issues that I have found with, the A9 Gen 6 processing. That's just, for me, it's a step backwards. Well, I don't think it's actually the MLA technology that's the issue. I think the MLA technology is just amplifying the issues that had already existed.
Yeah, I would imagine. All right, guys, we have the results coming in.
So the winner of the out of the box section was the Sony A95L. The top LCD performer in this shootout was the Samsung QN95C. The top 3 for SDR contest, and then top 3 for the HDR contest, and then obviously we'll have our King of TV winner. So for the SDR section, coming in third was the Samsung S95C with an 8.1. Coming in second was the LG G3 at an 8.5, and coming in first for SDR was the Sony A95L at 9.0. In HDR, we actually had to go out 2 decimal places to make to distinguish anything, which basically, like if you add it all up, more or less puts it a tie for second and third place. But under HDR, in third place this time, LG G3 with 8.38. Second place, Samsung S95C with 8.41. And the top was the Sony A95L with 9.3, meaning that the Sony A95L is the 4K King of TV for this year.
The Sony A95L won, but the LG actually came in second. It was so close with the Samsung that they called it a tie. People need to know that. It was.
So we need to know it's a tie. We need to know that.
Well, according to the scoring, the LG came in second. But I guess because
Can I clarify that with someone?
Yeah, you have to clarify with Robert.
So who is the official second place, Mr. Robert Zohn?
It is so close. It almost doesn't matter because it's really a tie for second.
It's definitely going to matter to the people in the audience.
Splitting hairs.
Talk to me.
It's LG's G3 by a tiny bit. Is number 2. So look at the ballots. Look at each element of image quality that we voted on and select what's best for the way you view your TV.
FOMO, you want to grab Classy? And I'd love to get his thoughts. The differences between the LEDs and the OLEDs was so far night and day.
Yes, it was.
Than it ever has. And Classy and I were discussing this. It's like the brightness of the LEDs didn't help them at all.
No.
And it felt like the OLEDs were brighter. And I've never been able to say this. They probably were brighter. They just seemed brighter. It wasn't even perception.
They actually are brighter.
They're
the reason
brighter.
being is the processing doesn't need to restrict the brightness like it does with local dimming.
That's right.
The local dimming is constantly pulling its capability down to try and make it not bloom.
I have a question for Classic. The qd-oleds were very close. Where did the Sony separate itself from the S95C?
So I think 85% of the time they're neck and neck. They look identical.
Right.
And then there's a couple of scenes here and there where the Samsung looked better or matched the reference better. And then there were a handful more scenes on the A95L where it was a little bit closer to the reference. Yes. So that's the difference there. But really, this is where you're trying to split hairs for that 1-2%. Mm-hmm. Once we put in the Apple TV and we put on streaming, the gap was massive.
For the A95.
Yeah, the A95, like on the scoring,
because
was
the processing
4s and 5s
is so much
across
better.
the board. So that's where it's like this event is great and it's amazing in for so many things, but for a lot of the people watching and buying,
we've been talking about which TV to buy. Did this shootout help you make your decision whether to get the Sony or the Samsung?
Yeah, and it was all of the reference content, the whole reference viewing. To me, they're interchangeable. It was only when we got to the Apple TV and I could see that clear difference with the low bit rate. Wow. I'm going to get the Sony.
Right.
So for me,
me,
being somebody who wanted an 85-inch LED for that new place, I'm going to have to go with a 77-inch QD-oled.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, just to point out,
I have to. Just the picture quality is not close.
And what I found most interesting is when we did the out of the box, all 3 OLEDs, sports, everything we put up, they looked almost identical out of the box.
Even
down
the
to the color, the brightness, all 3, the G3, the S95C, the A95L.
Which is actually impressive for the G3.
Very much
I was making a joke, like, did the 3 of them get together and like match brightness or something? Because they were identical.
A question for you, Phil, though. But when we went into the out-of-the-box mode without calibration,
that was a head turner because on the mini LED, the Samsung, I can't remember the model name off the top, QN95, actually had some magic to it. Like whatever they're doing made it much more comparable to the OLEDs, not next to, but like it was miles away from the other two.
Sony has a pride. So this is a different philosophy, right? I think Vizio has no pride. And yet, no.
Every video now.
I gotta bring
Dude, we talking about going with the wind. He's like, Vizio, by the way, sup?
No pride, but they make more money per unit.
Yeah.
I mean, right? And whereas Sony has a lot of pride. And so they're focused very much on image quality, which we love. But Vizio per unit probably makes more money. And we don't want Sony to go there. So let's not tell Sony. And Samsung is right in between. They want impressive technology, but they know to do just enough to sell TVs as a flagship, but not spend too much to really beat out Sony.
Well, and Samsung's first to market, first TV released. Then they followed up with another, maybe not flagship S90C. Then they follow up with an S95C. They have 42, 53, 51, like random sizes. They have technology for 8K, not one, not two. Yeah, two. So they end up killing you with volume. And yes, they don't win the prestige award, but they do end up winning the money award. And Samsung Displays is making money hand over fist right now. But I will say they're released at a high price. They get you there. And then by the time the A95L comes out, they hit you with now the value. So it's hard to then look at the S90C. It's so hard to recommend the S95C. The S90C is so close. Pride-wise, coming in second or third, I'm sorry, that's going to bother them quite a bit because the G3, it beat a better S95C. It's not like it came back and beat the S95B.
Right.
You know, do I think the G3 beat the S95C? I don't know. I think the S95C is excellent.